Hey everybody, welcome back to Living Traditions Homestead. Well, we have gotten so many requests for more information and more videos about the new Harvest Right freeze dryer that we just got for the homestead, that today we thought we'd bring you something kind of fun, something that shows you not only how to use the freeze dryer again, but actually what to do with the food once you freeze dry it.
Well, we are quickly realizing how much freezer space we're gonna free up now that we're using this freeze dryer. Also, we're realizing that we are going to be able to have fresh farm eggs all through the winter, even if our hens stop laying. Today we're gonna do something really fun. We're gonna freeze dry all the things that we need to make an omelet tomorrow morning for breakfast or brunch. We're gonna freeze dry some raw eggs, some diced onions, and some diced green peppers, all from the homestead. These are our eggs. These are our onions that we grew in 2020, diced up and put in the freezer. Now let me tell you something. We grow lots of onions, but we can't store them throughout the winter just, you know, in whole onion form.
Onions.
Yeah, so I dice them all and put them in freezer bags and all in the freezer. I have like 20 or 30 of these.
Oh, at least.
In the freezer, taking up a ton of freezer space. Well, I can take these out and freeze dry them, and then I have all of that freezer space left over for either other things or just maybe we won't have to use a freezer at all and then save that electricity.
Right. Now once these are freeze dried, we won't have to keep these in the freezer anymore. We'll be able to keep these either just in Mylar bags or in mason jars, and then we'll have a lot more space for that extra pig that we're raising this year in our freezer, which is going to be awesome.
Same goes for the green peppers. We grow all the peppers that we need for the entire year over the summer, and then I do the same thing. I dice them and freeze them in freezer bags, and they take up a lot of space. So we're freeing up a bunch of freezer space. Like I said, we're also going to be freeze drying some raw eggs from our chickens. They will be shelf stable. I have frozen my extra eggs in the past and it works. I mean, it works okay. They're not fantastic, but you guys, freeze-dried eggs are like a miracle.
Yeah.
They're amazing. I can't wait to show you how easily it is to freeze dry them and then to reconstitute them and have them be like scrambled eggs. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And each of these trays will hold 12.5 eggs. So we've already freeze dried probably 10 or 12 dozen eggs. I mean, we've freeze dried a lot of eggs already because it's just one of those things that take them while you can get them and then be able to use them all year long is awesome.
Exactly. So our freeze dryer machine holds 4 of these trays.
We have the medium size freeze dryer.
Yeah. So like Kevin said, 18 eggs per tray. We're going to use 2 trays for the eggs, and then one of these quart-size bags just completely filled with diced onions will go on one of the trays, and then also the same thing, a quart-size bag of diced green peppers will go on the other tray. That's what we're going to fill the entire freeze dryer with today.
Now, we're not each going to have an omelet with 18 eggs.
Well, I am.
Oh, you are?
I'm hungry. I'm going to be hungry.
Well, I'm not going to be that hungry.
So let's get started and get these things going.
Now with the Harvest Right freeze dryer, you have 2 options for when you're putting things in it. You can either put things in just raw room temperature, or you can put things in pre-frozen, which is what we prefer to do. Now the reason that it's better, or we think better, to put things in pre-frozen is that it saves quite a bit of energy on the freeze dryer itself. Otherwise, if you put things in just like, say, fresh vegetables, if you just put those in, it needs to then freeze everything first, and then it can start the freeze drying process. Where if you pre-freeze everything, you can put it in the freeze dryer and the freeze drying process can start that much faster. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put everything on these trays, and then we'll put these trays in one of our deep freezes. And then a few hours from now, maybe 3 or 4 hours from now, once everything is frozen solid, we'll actually take these trays and put them inside of the freeze dryer.
Now the tricky thing about liquids and putting them into these trays is that it's very easy to tip them and have all your liquids like fall out, or half of them anyway. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna put our 12.5 eggs in each jar, then we'll scramble them in here. We'll whip them up with the whisk attachment of my immersion blender, and then we'll take our jars and the trays out to the freezer, and fill the trays in the freezer. That way they're not gonna spill all over the place between here and our freezer out in the garage. Well, the eggs are all ready, so we're gonna go put these all in the freezer, get them nice and frozen. Then when we're ready to load up the freeze dryer, we'll bring you along at that time.
Well, the eggs and the onions and the peppers have been in the freezer long enough now that they are frozen solid, so it's time to load them into the freeze dryer. Now, I've already turned the freeze dryer on probably 20 minutes ago or so that it could cool down. It cools down below freezing before you load the food in. All right, so we're gonna open this up. Take off our insulator. All right, we're gonna get everything loaded in. We're gonna start with the peppers. Now we'll put in our onions. And then our 2 trays of eggs. Now that everything's loaded in, we'll put this insulator back on the front. Now this around the front here is a big rubber gasket, and when you close this door, it seals good and tight against that rubber gasket so that it can create the vacuum inside of the machine. So we just follow the instructions on the screen. I know you guys probably can't see that because it's so bright, but it says load food, close the drain valve, which we already did. We hit continue, and that's it. The machine does the rest. So we will leave this in here. I'm guessing that this will take somewhere between 18 and 24 hours based on how long it's taken in the past to do these same things. And we will see you guys back out here sometime tomorrow morning whenever they are finished. We'll be able to take a look at everything and then actually try cooking with it. Well, it's the next morning. We just got done doing chores and the freeze dryer is beeping at me that it is finished. So let's take a look inside, make sure that everything is done, and we'll start putting everything into jars so we can take it in the house and try to make some omelets. When the freeze dryer is completely done, it'll tell you right on here exactly what to do. In this case, it says open the drain, which we're going to do here. That releases the vacuum pressure from inside the machine. Once you hear that done, then we can move on. Now we'll open it up and we'll actually look at the stuff inside, the food inside, to make sure that it is completely dry. If it's not, we can hit more dry time. We'll close the vent and it'll run for a few more hours, but I think that this stuff is going to be done. We've done all of these items before, so I kind of know how long they're going to take. So let's look at the peppers. Oh, they are definitely done. Look how awesome those look. And the onions. Let's take the onions over to the table and get those in a jar. I'm going to turn this off so you guys can hear me a little better. There we go. All right, let's get these in a jar. Now, I'm not going to show you guys what the eggs look like because I know that Sarah is super excited to show you guys the eggs. So I'm going to just do these. All right, so we're going to put these in quart jars. Now, I don't know if you guys can tell, but I mean, these are like super light and just like, well, I'll show you. Look how they just kind of fall apart. Like you could grind this into onion powder super easy because it's so like light and fluffy. They smell awesome. Now, for those of you who didn't see the first freeze dryer video that we did, one of the main reasons we wanted to get a freeze dryer, and one of the main things that we like about freeze drying versus just dehydrating, which we do a lot of dehydrating, and there is a good place for dehydrating, but one of the nice things about freeze drying is it preserves nearly all of the nutrition in the food, where when you can or you dehydrate, you end up losing sometimes almost half of the nutritional value of the food when you're canning or dehydrating. So freeze drying is definitely the way to go. All right. Gosh, I wish you guys could smell these. They smell so good. Now, that's not to say that we are going to stop those other things. We definitely will continue to do a ton of canning, because honestly, in the summer when we've got sometimes, 50 to 100 pounds of tomatoes a day coming out of the garden, the freeze dryer is not going to keep up with that. So there are still a lot of things that we're going to be canning and dehydrating, and there'll still be some things we just plain out freeze. So for us, freeze drying is just another form of preservation. It's not going to replace any of the other things that we've already done. All right, let's get these covered up. One thing with freeze-dried food is that it can actually start to reabsorb moisture out of the air. So like if on a really humid day, it can actually start to suck some of that moisture back in out of the air and start rehydrating itself that way. Let's get the peppers out and put those in jars as well. Now, the reason that today we're putting these in mason jars instead of Mylar bags is because these are items that we're going to use pretty quickly. We'll probably use these in the next few months. So these aren't something we're putting away for long-term storage. These are just for short-term storage. So putting them in the jars is going to be just fine. I'm not even going to put oxygen absorbers in the jars that we're going to use first. But I am going to show you what we're going to do with the jars that we're not going to use right away today. These two jars we're going to set aside because these are the ones we're going to take these right in the house and use these to make our omelets. But these two fuller jars that we're not going to use right away today, we're actually going to vacuum seal these two jars. So here we have our food saver. This is one of those vacuum sealer for the bags. We've actually had this thing for probably 10 years or more. We don't actually use it for the vacuum seal bags anymore. The only reason we keep it around is for this attachment right here. This thing is pretty cool. This is the attachment that can actually vacuum seal jars. So what you do is you put your lid on top of the jar. You put this thing over the top of the jar. We'll turn this on. Then you pull that off and you can see that that is vacuum sealed, and now these will stay in here. There's no air. There's no way that these will get rehydrated. We can keep this for quite a long time just like that. So we'll do the same thing with this other jar of onions. Then we'll be ready for Sarah to show you guys the eggs.
Here are the raw eggs. You guys, this is like so amazing. They're completely dry. Isn't that amazing? They're like completely crispy. Look at that. Totally flaky, 100% dry. It's like amazing. So I'm going to actually be taking these out and putting them into my blender, and we're going to blend them up into a powder. And then we'll put them in a jar. I think eggs are one of the most interesting things to freeze dry. It's just kind of a mini miracle. Anything that is like 100% liquid to turn into this powder is just amazing. This will be some really great security for us in the winter If our hens stop laying because it's cold and because there's a lot less light, I'll be all set still with having our farm freeze-dried eggs over the winter. We're just gonna blend this up because it will really shrink the amount of space that these take up. It'll be a wonderful powder, really easy to work with also. We're just gonna put these in a jar. Easy as that. Just carefully pour them in. Look at the color of that, you guys. Isn't that absolutely gorgeous because of those nice orange yolks from the free-range chickens? Again, so in this jar are 18 eggs, a dozen and a half. These we're going to keep out to use for our omelet, but the second jar that I'm going to do is going to be vacuum sealed just like the onions and the peppers that Kevin did. So let's gather all of our things, get into the house so that we can make these omelets.
All right, well, we're back in the house. We've got our egg, our peppers, and our onions, and we're going to start the process to reconstitute these and make them into our breakfast.
This is the fun part, the eating part.
Now, what I'm going to do is something a little bit different than what Sarah's going to do. We're going to try these in two different ways. What I'm going to do is, first I'm going to put everything into a jar, because what I want to know is, how would this be if I wanted to take it camping or out in the woods with me or something like that. So I'm going to make basically a meal in a jar and see how that turns out. So for the eggs, it's 2 tablespoons of the powder equals 1 egg. So I'm going to put 4 tablespoons in. That would be the equivalent of 2 eggs. And then I'm going to put a tablespoon of each of the onions and the peppers. A good sized tablespoon. Because what I want to know is if I were to just make something like this up, you know, basically have this in my backpack or with my gear for hunting or whatever, can I just carry this with me, add some water when I'm out in the woods, and then have breakfast?
Build a fire?
Right. Make a fire or whatever and have breakfast. I mean, because that's pretty awesome. The other thing is you could make these up ahead of time for your kids, whatever, and just say, you know, have a little label on there that says add this much water, let it sit for 10 minutes, and then you have, you know, ready to eat. Just cook it and you're ready to eat. So I'm going to try mine that way. What are you going to do with yours?
Well, I'm going to make an omelet. I'm going to make a 2-egg omelet. So same as Kevin. I'm going to use 4 tablespoons of eggs. And then in a separate bowl, because I don't want them all mixed together, in a separate bowl, I'm going to put a tablespoon of the peppers and a tablespoon of the onions, because I'm going to put the eggs down first and then put the onions and the peppers, you know, on the side like you would for an omelet. So they're not all mixed together like scrambled eggs. So essentially, they're going to taste the same, but just a different way of cooking them. Okay, now when it comes to reconstituting these, the eggs, you'll add 2 tablespoons of water per egg, just like the 2 tablespoons of egg powder.
Right. So an egg is 2 tablespoons of powder, 2 tablespoons of water.
Right.
So you're going to add 4 tablespoons of water.
Which is really a 1/4 cup.
Right.
And what we have found is that 1 tablespoon of the onions and 1 tablespoon of the peppers mixed together, so 2 tablespoons, they'll reconstitute really well with just 1 tablespoon of water. So I'll put that in there, and I'm going to grab a spoon and mix those together.
And I'm going to basically add the same amount of water to my jar here, except I'm going to just shake mine up. So I'm going to add 5 tablespoons of water to my jar here. Which if you really wanted to, you could measure out even in a separate jar before you left home, and then just mix the 2 jars together. 5.
The eggs are so weird
Put
because
the cover back on.
the eggs are so weird. They're actually kind of like, you know, snotty, you know, like eggs are. I don't mean to be gross, but
Right. They look just like, they look like exactly like they were before we put them in the freeze dryer.
Right.
So I've got mine here. Look at that. It's like
perfect.
Breakfast in a jar. So I'm going to let that sit for about 10 minutes to let those peppers and onions reconstitute before we put it in a frying pan.
Right. I'm just going to let mine sit here, soak up the water, and soon we'll be good to go. Okay, it's been about, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes. I lost count. We're going to do the omelet first here on the stove top. We use cast iron. I love it. So we're just going to use a regular cast iron pan. I'm going to use just a dab of our home rendered lard. We just did this maybe last week or so. If you're interested in learning about that, you can make sure to check out that video. So just maybe like a teaspoon. Get that melting. I'm going to add the egg. This is just so amazing that turned, I mean, it just rehydrated into eggs the way they normally look. I'm just going to put that in the pan here. I'm going to add salt and pepper now. I'm going to flip it like a pancake. And then I'm going to add my veggies to one side. Flip it over. You know, you could add cheese to that and some meat. Just today we're just doing the veggies. Flip that over. Let that get nice and hot in there. Let's put that on the plate and give it a try. We're gonna try this omelet, but I want some sriracha sauce. This is my homemade sriracha. I did a video about that too. Do you want some hot sauce on yours?
But I'm gonna try this omelet. Let's try it.
Okay, wait. Ready?
Ready? It's perfect.
Now it's time for your scrambled eggs.
Yeah, these have been sitting out for quite a while. So let's get these in the frying pan and see how they turn out with the scrambled eggs. See if this is something we could take along on a road trip, on camping, whatever, and have ready to eat. All right, got the frying pan heating up. Give this one last shake. Let's see how this does. Put a little salt and pepper on, which honestly, you could have already added right to the jar with the dry ingredients if you weren't going to have salt and pepper with you on your camping trip. I think this is really cool. It's giving me lots of ideas for like meals in jars with the freeze dryer that I'm going to be able to make, or even variations of this. I mean, if you had scrambled eggs with the veggies and then some freeze-dried chicken or freeze-dried ground meat in there, I mean, it'd be perfect. All right, I think this is done. Let's get it on a plate and give it a try. All right, time to try the scrambled eggs. Now, I don't really suspect they're going to be any different than the omelet because it's the same ingredients, but again, though, they're perfect.
So
they're
good.
just exactly the way they would be with fresh ingredients. So that is pretty amazing. We went from the fresh items, turned it into the freeze-dried powder, which now this, if stored in a Mylar bag or, you know, with an oxygen absorber and everything, these eggs could last 25 to 30 years. So we have our egg powder. I'm I mean, same with these, 25 to 30 years. We could be eating an omelet 30 years from now from ingredients that we harvested off the farm today. That is pretty awesome.
That is pretty awesome. And it really gives us an additional way to preserve our harvest. We work so hard to grow and raise as much food as we possibly can. So to have another way to preserve our food for the long term,
right,
rather than just really for the short term.
Right.
Canning, dehydrating, while 2 or 3 years sounds great, I want to be able to preserve my extra harvest for much longer than that. So this is a fantastic option.
I think the hardest part for me though is going to be actually putting stuff away and saying this is for long term and not just eat it all right now, because to me this is like convenience food.
It sure is.
I mean, this is like, I'm thinking already I'm going to go make up, 10 of these in jars after this video and just have them sitting in the cabinet. So when I want an omelet, I just add water and make myself an omelet. So you guys, we hope you enjoyed this. If you want to see more videos about the freeze dryer, let us know. We don't want to overload you guys with it, but we're excited about it. It is really something that we're excited to have.
If you want to know more about it, we do have information in the description section below. Make sure you hit that little triangle. It'll open up the description section. Check it out there.
Also, watch the first video that we did about it. We talk about a lot of things. For example, the price of the machine itself and some of the obstacles for overcoming kind of the big price tag of it. So watch that video as well if you haven't seen it.
You guys, if you're enjoying our videos, make sure that you hit the subscribe button below. And as always, please share our videos. It's the best way for you to help us here on the homestead. Until next time, thanks so much for stopping by our homestead. Take care and God bless.
God bless.